Did you really expect for Game of Thrones to have an awesome ending? Well, you shouldn't have. Let's be honest about something. Everything that made Game of Thrones, this phenomenal series, a success is antithetical to everything a good ending for a series demands. Let's make an analogy from history. Do you know what the Gordian Knot is? The Gordian Knot is an ancient artifact. It was a very complex knot with too many twists and turns, and it was deemed impossible to be untied. There was a legend that whoever manages to untie the Gordian Knot will become the king of the world. Alexander the Great had the ambition to rule the world, so he was presented the Gordian knot. He saw it was a mess, so he untied it by cutting it in two. Why I'm telling you that? Because to me, A Song of Ice and Fire is pretty much a Gordian knot. I'll use both terms, A Song of Ice and Fire, to refer to the book version of the story, and A Game of Thrones to refer to the series. A Game of Thrones is the name of the first book of A Song of Ice and Fire, and also the name for the TV series. A Song of Ice and Fire is a deconstruction of the epic fantasy genre. It's a very complex series of books that are constantly expanding. They're famous for subverting tropes. I mean, I remember reading the first book back in 2004, and I was shocked when Ed Stark lost his head. Yes, we're going to have some spoilers because we're talking about the ending of a series. So, unless you have watched the series or read the books, then I'm sorry, you shouldn't be watching this video. Song of Ice and Fire is also famous for throwing curveballs like the Red Wedding. Reading A Song of Ice and Fire or watching A Game of Thrones is a constant surprise. There are surprises coming up, and that's why we love it, because people die when you don't expect it. Things happen that make sense to happen, but you shouldn't expect them to happen because they don't agree to the tropes. That, of course, creates a storyline, a plot line that looks like a Gordian knot. There are lots of twists and turns all over, and it gets very complex. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the showrunners of A Game of Thrones, in order to reach an ending, had to cut this Gordian knot of a series to finish it. Since season 4, they have been pruning some plot lines, they have been simplifying stuff, like for instance, they put Sansa on Winterfell, where George R. R. Martin doesn't follow this plotline at all. He does something completely different in A Dance of Dragons, the book. And beginning with season 6, they killed off a lot of characters. I mean, I remember watching the first episode and I was laughing at how many people died in order to get rid of their plot lines. And they've added a ton of plots that way. So they start to funnel everything towards an ending with season 8. They're not the only one who did that. George R. R. Martin, in the second book of A Song of Ice and Fire, called The Clash of Kings, you know it as season 2 of A Game of Thrones if you have read the books, did the same thing. He had a ton of characters that were opposing one another, had a Mexican standoff between them, so he introduced a number of Deus Ex Machina to kill off some of them. Mostly it was Melisandre. It was organic to the plot, but I remember reading this thing and I was a bit disappointed. It was a sore spot for me in the original material, and I firmly believe that books 1 and 3 of A Song of Ice and Fire are the highlights, not book 2, and definitely not books 4 and 5, because, tell you what, Game of Thrones, sorry, A Song of Ice and Fire is a very complex epic, and you have stuff happening, the plot ever expanding, becoming more complex as certain stuff come up. And in books 4 and 5, George R. R. Martin decided that he cannot skip forward 5 years as he was originally intending to. There were some plot lines being developed, taking a life of their own, and he had to work on them. So he created 2 books that are huge. They have some stuff that are very interesting and also a lot of filler. And he had to do that because he had to continue to the successful formula of the series. He had to get to a competent ending of it, because when you have a fantasy doorstopper epic, it changes over time as it's being written. An example of that is the other big fantasy doorstopper epic from the mid 90s, Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen. Malazan Book of the Fallen is totally different to A Song of Ice and Fire in many ways. True, they both started in 1996. Both their first books were published then. But for Malazan Book of the Fallen, the series has been completed on time. It ended up being a 10,000 page long epic series that had a huge cast. I mean, the people that die on the first 100 pages of the first book are pretty much the entire Song of Ice and Fire cast. It spans 3 or 4 continents, tons of characters, tons of plots. Instead of being a deconstruction of the fantasy epic tropes, takes every fantasy trope and cranks it up to 11. The way it was written is completely different from A Song of Ice and Fire. A Malazan Book of the Fallen had an ending in sight from the beginning, and all the plots started from different points and were funneled in towards it. There was an ending for everything, and we reached that one. The ending was good, especially the final chapter was amazing. But going there, we had some plot lines and characters getting a life of their own. So when we reached their big moment towards the end, sometimes it fell flat. And we also had some plot lines that were not that great and they dragged a bit. A Song of Ice and Fire is written differently. We have a premise, general ending, and we have a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of characters coming up and doing things of their own. And I think that's one of the reasons George R. R. Martin hasn't finished the 6th book yet, because it gets very complicated. And for A Song of Ice and Fire or for Game of Thrones to be successful, you pretty much expect the plot to expand, take weird turns, and to grow organically. So all this pruning that's been done in the series is not quite working, because it's not an expanding story anymore. It's a diminishing story. It doesn't feel quite organic. A Game of Thrones, the final seasons, take everything that made the first season success and throw it out of the window in order to complete. That's why this mismatch creates much of the controversy, and I don't think it is done very well, to be honest. Many of the changes, many of the plots feel they are rushed. True, there are some stuff that are being built over time, such as Daenerys' heel turn in the penultimate episode, and this is pretty much how I felt seeing that. For those who are in the Marvel comics too, hope you get the joke. Never mind. So, there are some stuff like Daenerys' heel turn being built for seasons. Yet, when they happen, they feel very abrupt because they subvert tropes, they subvert expectations, like the book does. But they don't feel organic anymore. They feel very planned, and they feel very planned because we want to have a Stark on the throne. So let's get rid of Daenerys, the season 8, episode 5 example. The production values are still very high. I think they're higher than ever, but we had some very disappointing episodes in season 5 in my opinion, such as the Beyond the Wall episode, and we also had complications being introduced there. And even though we have some TV movie length episodes in the last season, much of what happens feels very calculated, and the hyping of the final season doesn't help at all. Much of the backlash comes from people expecting the best series finale ever, and instead we get inferior product that explains much of the fan backlash, especially when fan favorite characters like Daenerys or fan reviled characters like Cersei getting very abrupt plot twists or plot endings. I mean, Cersei doesn't do anything in the last season, and that really rubs me wrong because she was the queen bitch of the series. She was a great antagonist, and she's relegated to, oh, I lost, because Daenerys is so OP. We also have a lot of problems with inconsistencies, like we have the Dothraki charts on the undead and their lights being snuffed out, We had the Undying and the Norsemen dying in the third episode against the undead. However, there is a big army in episode 5. We had ballista bolts killing a dragon in episode 4. And on episode 5, we had a dragon evading everything and burning a fleet on its own. And in episode 3, we had a dragon breathing fire on a rock. And Jon Snow was behind it and he wasn't even bothered by it. And in episode 5, we have a dragon destroying buildings, melting stone with his fire. I mean, okay, if Dracarys could melt stone, he could breathe fire and melt an army of the undead. But no, this did not happen in episode 3. It's like the Pats meme they did about rebalancing characters was very funny. And the plot armor in the final 2 seasons is annoying. A Game of Thrones was a series when characters could die at every moment and you had to watch them, you had to worry about them. But in the final 2 seasons, characters are laughingly invulnerable to everything. They can go against an army of the undead and face tank them like it's a video game. They can fast travel, their abilities are either amazing or they are very bad. They're very inconsistent all over. And then we have some characters like Sansa having their character completely changed. I mean, I liked Sansa in the books. She was a bimbo, a tragic character because she had an arc where she does stupid things and she pays for that. And reading Sunset chapters in A Dance with Dragons was one of the best. No, it was not Dance of Dragons. It was A Feast for Crows, the fourth book. Reading her chapters in that book was amazing because you can see every stupid things she did come out of the woodwork and bite her, and it was a great arc. But in the final season of A Game of Thrones, we have Arya telling, "Oh, she's the smartest person I know," and the whole idea of Sansa becoming smart because of the abuse she has experienced, that makes no sense for Littlefinger to do something like that. Let's be frank about this. It's insulting. It's insulting to everybody's intelligence and feels very inorganic. Everything feels like it's being set up for Jon Snow to get the throne. But problem is Jon Snow has done nothing of value in the last 2 seasons. So getting him to be the king also feels very inorganic. Everything is done by Sansa and Arya or Daenerys. So yeah, the main point is that the last season of A Game of Thrones, even though it could in no way feel great, because having a good finale is very different to what made Game of Thrones a success, is also ruined by how forced it feels, how scripted it feels, how different is this from the show we so loved all those years, or the books we loved in so many years. And I hope George Martin manages to finish the books eventually, because this epic deserves a good ending and the series fails to do that. I'm sorry to say that. So I'm waiting for the final episode today and I hope it won't be the disappointment. But I think this series, the final series for Game of Thrones, is a disappointment. More so that the disappointment it could be. It feels like a train wreck. So, at this very sad point, let me thank you for listening that far, and I'll probably have a video about the finale tomorrow. Have fun. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever you want to do, and I'll see you again with another geeky video. Goodbye.